Okay folks, so as you know, a couple months ago, the Rogue was banned from our group, and then he weaseled his way back in under the guise of Gary the Intern.
Oh yeah, I remember. And then you all were ignoring me over the course of several game sessions when I was trying to tell you that Gary was acting funny.
Yeah, and no one would believe you. That's how good I am.
Oh, whatever. We would have noticed, but we were too busy playing D&D.
Actually, our group really doesn't play a lot of D&D. We mostly get together and have a wide variety of side conversations that have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, in a given 4-hour game session, we only play about 15 minutes of real, actual D&D.
And while I agree, I would love to play more actual D&D, that's not what we were talking about.
Good point.
Yes. Anyway, after we unmasked Gary and then discovered it was the Rogue posing as Gary, it was revealed that...
I know. The Rogue had taken Gary as hostage. I was gonna peel off his scales one by one if we didn't let him keep playing with us.
Yes, and now, as a sort of gesture of good faith and proof of life, the Rogue is going to let Gary the Intern come play with us for a few game sessions.
Oh, that sounds great. Everybody loves Gary the Intern. Well, I hate to point this out, but there's only so much room at our game table.
Which is why we're going to have to decide which of you is going to sit out of the game for a little while.
Well, this sucks.
Oh, I know. We can have our wonderful viewers let us know down in the comments which one of the players here should go on vacation to make room for Gary the Intern.
Viewers? What viewers?
Yeah, I never consented for my personal likeness to be used by a greedy corporate entity for monetary gain.
If only we could just play D&D. Welcome to the DM Lair. I'm Luke Hart, and I've been a Dungeon Master since high school. On this channel, I give practical Dungeon Master advice that you can use in your Dungeons & Dragons games. Today in the Lair, we'll be talking about how to create homebrew monsters for your D&D games. Now, the in-depth rules for creating a monster are on page 273 of the Dungeon Master Guide if you want to refer to them. However, I'm going to tell you right now that they are fairly complex, probably one of the most complex rule sets in the entire game, besides creating characters, which takes up a good portion of the player's handbook. So my goal today is to explain the high-level process of monster creation and then walk through the complexities of determining and balancing the challenge rating, or CR, of a monster, which is hands down the most difficult part. And then this Friday over on my Twitch channel, link below, we're going to create some homebrew monsters together so you can see all of this theoretical stuff in action. My guess is that seeing a few examples of monsters being created is going to be super useful in helping you understand how the process works. And once that live stream is over, I'll post the video of it over on my second YouTube channel, the DM Lair Streams, and include a link below. That way, folks who miss the stream will always be able to watch it. Now, as many of you already know, I recently started publishing tons of Dungeon Master resources every single month over on my Patreon, and as a result, lots of folks have become new patrons recently. So, I want to take a moment, or several, to personally thank the following new patrons: DM0865, James L, Jimmy B, Vincent, Jake L, Sakura, Paul B, Leopold, X92, Jan G, Gregory L, Dorham, Troy B, Michael C, Eric W, Robert W, Jamie V, Mark F, Donald L, Dermont, Chris K, Arutha, Cole O, Pork Chop Bacon, Nathaniel F, Mirostal, Sean S, April H, Fruity Pebs, Taylor T, 5e Magic Shop, David W, Michael F, Mad Quad, Race W, Izzy T, C Zachary, Sean P, Tyler N, Jeremiah F, Cade M, and Eric S. And if you'd like to see what all the hype is about, link to my Patreon page is down below. Okay, and now let's go through the steps of homebrewing a monster before folks start hunting me down for taking forever to get into the video. Number 1, create the monster concept. You're just simply going to brainstorm the new monster that you want to create, and this is admittedly the easiest step of this entire process. You could also take an existing monster such as the Goblin and create a variant, such as a Goblin Sorcerer. Or you take the Goblin and you beef it up so that it's a CR5 monster and you call it a Goblin Champion. Or you find the image of a cool monster on Instagram or Google that doesn't even have a stat block at all, and you create one for it. This is a great way to create monsters, by the way. You start with an image that you can show your players when they encounter the monster in the game, and then you just stat it out. And sometimes getting the concept for a cool new monster can be tough, so you just browse through images of monsters and weird creatures that help spark your creativity and give you ideas for new monsters and their special abilities. For my Kickstarter, Into the Fae, I wanted to create several different types of satyrs, so I brainstormed concepts for satyr bards, satyr fire breathers, satyr mad bombers, and satyr drunken masters. What you're seeing on screen right now is the artwork I commissioned for the satyr mad bomber. Step 2. Find an existing stat block that is similar to what you need. You could, if you are very, very brave and have a high pain tolerance, write the stat block for your new monster from scratch. But that is tons more work than starting with an existing stat block. So what I recommend is that you find a stat block for a monster that you want to create that is close to the new monster that you want to do, and then you tweak it a little bit. For instance, if you want to create a tentacle monster of sorts, start with a grell or a grick or a giant octopus or a kraken even. In the case of my Kickstarter Into the Fae and the satyrs that I made, I simply started with a stat block for a satyr and then I tweaked it for the different variants. Number 3, change the stat block to represent your monster concept. Okay, so you found a stat block that's pretty close to what you want to do, then you tweak that stat block a little bit. You change its ability scores, you give it special abilities, you give it cool different types of attacks, that sort of thing, until you have the new monster that you want. Now back to what I did for Into the Fae, when I wanted to make the satyr bard, I added to the satyr stat block some spell casting abilities with spells, obviously, and then I also had 2 special abilities I gave the satyr bard, the Song of Courage and a Song of Despair. For the satyr drunken master, I gave him unarmored defense, a drunken mastery ability, and a bottle smash attack. For the satyr fire breather, I gave him a flaming torch attack and a fire breath attack using alcohol that it would spit out over a flaming torch. And you can see here that I flavored my satyrs, traditionally a wine-loving creature, to incorporate their love of drink into their creature concepts and stat blocks. By the way, my Kickstarter Into the Fae is available for pre-order now at the link below, and fulfillment is planned to begin early this summer. It's a level 1 to 5 5th edition adventure module featuring lots of new Fae creatures and a compelling storyline and adventures that are not just hack and slash. Step 4. Calculate the challenge rating of the new monster and adjust as needed. All right, now we're gonna get into the nitty gritty. We're gonna get into the math. We're gonna get into the hard part. We're gonna get into the part of creating a monster that frankly sometimes just gives me a big old headache. It's not a whole lot of fun, but we're gonna get into it. I'm gonna explain it and we're gonna do it. Okay, first thing you need to know. A monster's overall challenge rating, what you would list in its stat block, is based on 2 things. Its defensive challenge rating and its offensive challenge rating. Now you're not going to see those in the stat block, the offensive and defensive challenge rating, but they are components that are used to calculate the overall challenge rating that is listed in the stat block. Now there's a big old cool chart on page 274 of the Dungeon Master Guide titled Monster Statistics by Challenge Rating. And that chart is used to calculate offensive and defensive challenge ratings. And you can see that the defensive challenge rating is based on armor class and hit points. And then the offensive challenge rating is based on attack bonus or save DC and damage per round. And the average of the defensive CR and the offensive CR equals the monster's overall challenge rating, which goes in the stat block. Note that there is a list of monster features on Dungeon Master Guide pages 280 to 281 that lists how certain monster abilities affect offensive and defensive CR. Okay, so based on the specific stats of the monster you just created, you want to use the rules detailed in the Dungeon Master Guide to calculate the overall challenge rating of the monster. And you could use the rules in the Dungeon Master Guide and punch the numbers by hand with a calculator. Believe me, I've done it before, and it's miserable. It results in lots of recalculating, adjusting, recalculating. It's absolutely the last thing you want to do. So what you want to do instead is use an online monster CR calculator where you can simply punch in some basic information about the monster, hit points, armor class, damage per round, attack bonus, save DC, resistances and immunities, and special features, and then the tool calculates the CR for you. Now, I personally use the CR calculator at 5e Tools, which I will link down below for you. This makes the calculation process easy. If the CR is too high or low, you can tweak some things and then recalculate. and you rinse and repeat until you hit that CR that you're aiming for. Alright, some important notes about calculating a monster's damage per round. First, the overarching rule here is to use the highest damage output the monster has to calculate its damage per round. So you use the average damage of the monster's most damaging attacks to figure out its damage per round. For many monsters, this is simple. A goblin, for instance, has 1 attack per round with a scimitar that deals 5 average damage. So you use 5 as its damage per round. Other monsters, however, are more complicated. I mean, they might have things like multi-attack, which you gotta add a few things together and do some calculations and stuff. It's not that hard, but you gotta use your noggin. If the monster has abilities with cooldown effects, such as an adult red dragon's breath weapon, you calculate the average damage over 3 rounds. So a red dragon breathes its fire on the first round, and then it uses its multi-attack on the next 2 rounds. I add up the average damage of all those attacks over the 3 rounds, divide by 3, and I have the damage per round I use to calculate the monster's CR. And the second thing to keep in mind here is that area of effect spells and some abilities damage more than one creature at a time, so you need to account for that, such as in the example of a red dragon breathing its fire. Because when that adult red dragon breathes its fire, it doesn't hit just 1 enemy. No, it's probably going to hit 3 enemies. So we take the average damage of 63 from each fire breath and multiply it by 3 when calculating the damage dealt by that attack. And spells are the same way here. A fireball spell is probably going to hit 3 enemies, so we multiply the average damage of that spell by 3. Now, part of this is that you will need to estimate how many enemies a spell or effect is likely to hit. And it's not a perfect science. For instance, a 15-foot cone will likely hit 2 enemies. However, a 60-foot cone is probably going to hit 3 or 4. I have had dragons flying overhead, breathing a cone down at the party, and you better believe they hit all 5 of them because they position themselves just perfectly overhead so that the base of the cone is absolutely massive. Third thing to keep in mind here is for spellcasters, assume they use their 3 best spells on the first 3 rounds and then average the damage from them. For instance, if a spellcaster can only cast Fireball once and then Scorching Ray twice, and those are the spells they have that deal the most damage, I use those to calculate the damage output. Gray areas of calculating challenge rating. There are a few gray areas here that make this whole process that much more challenging. First, spells that don't cause damage are still very powerful and affect the challenge rating of a creature. However, of course, the formula in the Dungeon Master Guide does not account for it. Let me throw some examples at you. Hypnotic Pattern, Hold Person, Banishment, Wall of Force. These are all super powerful spells that could very well affect the course of combat more powerfully than just doing straight damage. Everyone should know that spellcasters with crowd control abilities are way more dangerous than spellcasters who just do damage. So how do you account for their challenge rating? You gotta guess. I mean, it's not pretty, but I know no other way. The rules do not help us. I mean, you might just bump the CR up by 1 or 2 if I know the spells have some hefty crowd control abilities. And if somebody knows a better way, please let us all know down in the comments. This is why it's a gray area. It's like, who knows? Second, special abilities that don't do damage present the same difficulties as spells that don't do damage. Now, it's possible that you might find a similar monster feature from the table on Dungeon Master Guide pages 280 to 281 to see what effect it might have on the CR. Or you can just estimate it to the best of your ability. Final note about calculating a monster's CR. It's not a perfect science. You just gotta do the best you can. And at the end of the day, the challenge rating and encounter difficulty calculations as a whole aren't very accurate nor useful anyway, so don't fret too much if you can't always figure out the monster's exact challenge rating. Just use an online tool, get as close as you can, and then call it a day. If you get too OCD about this, believe me, your head will explode. I've been there. It was not pretty. I got better though. Don't forget to follow me over on Twitch at the link below so you can join us for this Friday's live stream, when we'll be creating several homebrew monsters together. And I've also included a link to my second YouTube channel, the DM Lair Streams, where you'll be able to view the VODs of that live stream, my Q&A live streams, and my Curse of Strahd games whenever you'd like. If you've enjoyed the sheer amount of plugs I've managed to slip into this video, give me a thumbs up and leave a comment for the algorithm down below. Let YouTube know that I don't completely suck. Next week, I'll be discussing why random tables are awesome. But until then, click right here to learn how to create a D&D adventure. And until next time,
Let's play D&D!